and then they drop you there and they say we come after that many days. Good luck. And what you're allowed to have is just a knife, and we had like some kind of metal, and that's it. So I can tell you this course, and in general surviving in wilderness is not a luxury experience. You really need to learn different skills. So they were teaching us every day what you can eat from plants and how you can survive without getting sick. How do you build a shelter, even in very cold circumstances? How can you build even fire to have it somehow in snow, like a fire bed, so to say, covered with something and so on. So different tricks how Marines are surviving and so on. But every evening, my favorite part was when we finished the whole day, which was very intense training and exhausting, that we go on top of the hill, and this is like a big plateau area. It's like a field surrounded by those big trees, but there you can see the sky. And you know how it is when there is no other sources of light around. There is no cities, there is no lamps. Then you can see sky much deeper than usually. And it's a beautiful experience. We were laying there head to head around in a circle, and there was a lady who had her own observatory. She was expert in stars. So she was telling us different legends about stars and how to use stars to navigate the space and so on. And but the most impressive thing for me is just spending that time next to those huge trees, which I was not used to living in Serbia. My assumption was they could stand there for 1,000 or 2,000 years and withstand all sorts of storms and different, weather conditions because they have very, very deep roots. This would be a logical thing to think. But I was surprised to learn that in one of the evenings when I asked the lady about those trees, she actually said, no, they actually have very shallow rooting system. But the rooting system of those trees is interlocked. They're holding each other. So it's a relatively shallow system. It's just they're holding each other. So when there is storm, it's enough for them to not to be alone on its own in a field, but they are holding each other. And I said, what a great example from nature, what human community should be in our life. Interlocked system of roots. Something which will help you stand in a time of troubles. Something that can help you grow. Something that can help you withstand the storms. And you can see how it's in human nature when we have a crisis, when we have crazy people running vans into the crowd and killing so many people, and bombs going around, and terrorists attacking. Usually the reaction is that people gather together in a sign of solidarity. Somehow together, when we are together, it's easier. Okay? Now, this is the same principle which applies to our life of fullness. I believe, and as we talked about in the morning, the first condition for us to really experience the astonishing aliveness, to experience the fullness of life, is to reconnect with the source. And we talked this morning, how do you reconnect with the source of fullness, with the Spirit? Okay? Now, the first result, and we read the text, when we reconnect with the Logos or with Spirit, with God, is that community happens. Okay? Authentic community, or it should happen. Maybe it doesn't, So this is the first result. And as a result of this community, we have fullness of joy. So technically the main premise here is that if you really want to have a fullness of life, fullness is defined relationally. It's defined in relationship with what you have with your Creator, relationship to the nature around, and relationship with other people and yourself. My question to you, can we experience the fullness of life without other people? Can we experience the fullness of life without a community? What do you think? But would you just your thoughts? Something would be missing. Certain dimension of life would be missing. Yeah, there are people who live very lonely and they live the life. They exist, but existing is not the same as living. Okay, and there are many different studies, and the most famous one is the one presenting TEDx, the Harvard study. This is the longest stretching study of people. 75 years. 75 years they tracked people finishing Harvard, and what they established is they had different functions in life, starting with the cleaners to the presidents and so on. But those that had stronger connections, even if imperfect connections, but connections, they were generally reporting the subjective feeling of being more fulfilled in life, setting more meaning and more purpose in life. So there is this trend in Christianity, which is called churchless spirituality, which is technically claiming that you can be spiritual on your own. You don't need other believers. So this individualistic trend is spreading all across different denominations, and people are leaving the church not because they don't believe in God, not because they don't necessarily appreciate the concept of community, but they simply feel that church is standing on their way to reach God. And we are living this generation that we feel suspicious towards bureaucracy, towards institution, towards somebody who will use us. We have this kind of anti-institutional sentiment. We prefer having personal relation. So those people leave the church, and they believe that technically we don't necessarily need a church or community for fulfilled life. So who are they? There was a sociologist who did a qualitative study, Alan Jamieson, who studied the people who are leaving the church just to see this interdenominational trend which is spreading. What's the cause of it? And then different reasons were reported. People feel that they don't fit in. Simply, this is not good for me. Or they feel constantly guilty. People who think that they're holy, they go into these gatherings, but I don't feel like that. Then they have different doctrinal opinions. They often feel bullied in the church. Or they feel the church is simply irrelevant, it's claustrophobic and controlling. They feel a sense of powerlessness. You can't do anything. You just come there is a prescribed set of events or rituals that have to happen. Somebody else is in charge. No matter what you say, it does not change the church. So there is a lack of spiritual development. They feel bored. And there is even failure by leadership. Sometimes if you fall, if you make some mistake, often you are very judged. And then people feel that their case was not handled right. So all sorts of cases why people leave the church, somehow they do not fit in. And what was surprising element in Jamieson's study is that people who are leaving the church are not the people who necessarily came there, been there a few years and went. No, those are people who are in leadership position. Not only young people because it's not cool to go to church, but middle-aged people. More than 15 years in church they were before they decided to leave. So this is something which was unexpected in the study. There's this idea in 21st century of individualistic spirituality that's you and Christ, or you and God, or you if you don't believe in Christianity, maybe you and the ultimate being, whoever that is, that's sufficient. It's a private thing, other communities simply not needed. Now, interestingly he uses the analogy to describe what's happening here. Alan Jamieson uses the analogy of a cruiser, or this liner who is going to the seas, and the people who are there, they got tired of endless buffets, entertainment, they carefully design activities, or the captain who makes all decisions about the ship's speed and direction. So they want to experience something more adventurous. They want what is not an itinerary. They sell all they have, they buy a small boat and leave the well-traveled sea lines for uncharted waters. So this is the analogy. They would rather be in a small boats, exploring on their own, in their own pace, in their own time, spirituality. So what they do is they leave the church, yet they visit certain spiritual concerts or maybe some socializing or some certain activity, and they still find a group in which they live and they travel. They are much more flexible. They don't like commitments, a lifelong commitment, but they still are trying to find the spiritual companions. Now this is very interesting. People leaving the church to find something which church was supposed to be. Exactly, was supposed to be a community. Leaving the community to be a community. Maybe this is alarm for the different churches around us and our own, that we lost the connection with the source of power. Maybe it's alarm that along the way we lost something very crucial about what makes church church. And then people have the prejudice, church is something which is a worldwide organization, I cannot change it. It does crusades even in Christian, it does all terrible things. It's a political organization, somebody's taking your money and so on. We just leave it because we don't feel that the reason why we go to church is actually this authentic community. But we simply feel the church is not fulfilling that function. And that's why people leave. Okay, this is a small study. And there is an anti-institutional sentiment, protest against formalism, uniformity, preference for low-level commitment. That's the general sentiment of our time. Now, how should we respond to this? There are many different ways. We can try to accuse people as failing in their faith and so on, or ignore the problem. But I think if you're responsible, if you love other people, we would engage with it and maybe learn something more about what it means to be authentic community. We can be constructive and see what can we learn. What's the element which is missing in religious community that we should live and we are not doing it? Maybe then we will realize, aha, we can do certain things better. Okay, and this applies not only to Christian communities. It applies to also different religions. In every religion we have something called ecclesiology, technically the vision of community, how community should function as a foundation group for growth, for spiritual growth. Anyway, so what I did is I took this word koinonia, which I introduced in the morning, which means this very close connection and community. I took this word and then I track it in 39 places where it appears in apostolic writings, in New Testament writings. And then, of course, I will not torture you through that exercise, but I noticed there are certain principles, 6-7 principles that turn out to be like a patterns that I can detect, dimensions of community which we need to pay attention to if you really want to be authentic community, to live without masks, to live in fulfilling community that we will not want to leave. Okay? So this is what I found. When koinonia is mentioned in New Testament, in different writings, it's always a theocentric reality. What is that? Theo or theos, God. Centric means God-centered. Somehow God or this force or ultimate being is in the center of community. It's the force which generated the community. It started the community, it maintains its life, and it's helping it grow. Interesting, in the New Testament, we already talked about it this morning, people were impressed. They were speechless in a sense of wonder when they saw the first Christian community. Because it embodied this kind of koinonia, and they said, wow, this is more than human. So many different people, broken people, different nationalities, different races, and everything. Somehow now they exist as a family. And they could not describe this new phenomenon of koinonia, so they use 95 metaphors in New Testament to try to capture the essence of it. The metaphors such as, this is the body of Christ, this is a temple of the Spirit, this is the field of God, this is the people of God, this is the letter of God, and so on, and the list continues. There's a list, and the detailed analysis by Paul Minar, you can find it, his book is very interesting, very detailed. So you can see that always when koinonia is mentioned, this is a reality which is divinely initiated. People feel when surrounded by these kind of communities that somehow I'm closer to God and to divine. I experience a sense of heaven, heavenly love. Okay? So if people felt that in our communities, they would not leave. Okay? We all long to be touched by heaven. We all long to be part of something greater than ourselves. To be part of this kind of cosmic story. Okay? Not to live in isolation. We long to be connected. So often church can be seen as a human manipulation, the place where human intrigues are happening and people are trying to promote themselves and so on, and who will do better, who is, all sorts of human affairs are happening in this community, and we fail to see the reality behind it, above it, within it. The reality we talked about this morning, pneuma. That God is in the center. There is something drawing these people together, and when they allow themselves to be governed or led, or when they allow themselves to open up to this force of pneuma, they become better people. They're opening up, less selfish. They're becoming less selfish. Anyway, that's the first characteristic. And this brings us to a second part. Koinonia is a very complex, multifaceted, communal phenomenon. That means this. It has many different angles. The closer you are to God, okay, the closer you are to God, the closer you are to each other. And the more you love each other, the more you understand what God is. It goes together. So, imagine spirituality without this aspect. Then we will have this kind of individualistic journey. This is not called koinonia. Koinonia is incomplete. On the other side, if this person does not have connection, we will call this mission, which is technically this person responding to the call of God to try to encourage this person to reconnect. That's called mission. Now, if you don't have these two sides of this pyramid or triangle, we have a communism. Human attempt to attain perfect relationship without the notion of divine. So any of those is incomplete koinonia. In order to have the full reality that the New Testament is talking about, we need something which is reciprocal, something that is directly connected, interconnected with God and with each other. And the whole book now, 1 John, that we talked about in the morning, it explains that you can't say that you love God if you don't love another human being. If you say that, you are a liar, the text says, you know. Because here is where you can see, at this horizontal level, you can see where this vertical exists. Jesus himself said, people will know that you are mine because you love each other. So love and relationship in koinonia among the people is proof that we belong also to vertical or to this kind of relationship with God. Anyway, so we come now to a more aspect which tells us what this koinonia entails. Now it's clear that it's a set of relationship that is ongoing. It goes different directions, okay? And somehow it's divinely initiated. That's what we learned. But how does it look like? It's not just a matter of people gathering, people who have same goals and vision of life. These are clubs, social clubs. We have those same interests, or businesses. We have same business goal. This is a group which shares the entire life, complete life. So this is a group where you can share your emotions also, where you can open up. The group who will not go around and talk about your failings and your brokenness when you confine in that group, which will hold you and accept you for who you are without any masks. Fully accepted, learning what it means to love and to be loved in return. That's the greatest lesson we learn. And this is possible only if this is a matter of life, not necessarily just we gather once a week, we gather for certain occasions because we like to sing, or we like to worship, we like to maybe help our community. It involves the lifestyle. And this is what I understood the purpose of your group is. It involves different aspects of life. It brings people together because you share the same passion for the well-being of the world around you, for nature, for society, because you respond to God, because you love each other, and so on. Even though this is the beginning of this kind of group, what I saw is happening, the more church becomes something which is sharing the entire life, and you share what you believe in, your dreams, and you open up, the stronger it gets and the more real it gets. My first glimpse of this kind of community was actually during the war in Serbia. I come from northern part of Serbia, I mentioned that, Novi Sad. The house of my aunt burned down to ashes, okay? And then what happened is the local community that they were part of The same day, everybody came, around 100 people, you know. She lived there with the family, two boys and a husband. They survived, and everything what they had was burned, except the money of that group. That's very interesting. There was only one closet which didn't burn. This is the money of collection of this group towards serving the community in Novi Sad, technically. So they were already like wondering what was going on here. But this community kept coming, 100 people every single day after work, after school, and they were giving what they have. Some people brought the paint, some people their expertise, some people who did not have expertise at the time, like myself. I was just trying to clean, and so we spent a few months and built them a completely new house from scratch. They did not have any, no money, nothing, you know. It's quite a relatively poor community around, poor community, even those members. But they put what they had, their skills, some of their money and so on, and we rebuilt the whole house. And the family decided to open up their doors for people who live on the street, people who have a need. Since then, since 1990s, they constantly have people living at their place. Their house is open for others to serve their needs. Many people live there for a year or two even at their place. Anyway, but in this experience, we experienced the closeness, those people who are working together. Because we were meeting every day, exchanging thoughts and so on, and we never felt as close to each other. And then comes the bombing in 1999, and NATO bombing Serbia. This was a terrible time I was there literally where the bombs were falling around, aiming at different bridges, and detonations were so strong at a certain point that it literally throws you out of your bed, breaks the windows, all the books fall down, everything. So after maybe a few weeks of that, you had it enough. Sometimes it's like 40 bombs per day. And so we felt like we need some kind of rest from this. So what we did is, we went to their house. It's like 12 kilometers from the main city in Novi Sad, in a village called Čene, and this is like a farmhouse, and like 10 to 12 of us with bicycles. And we said, okay, we're going to spend their day there, because there is no reason why they would aim in sort of random fields with rockets, so we are safe there. And so what happened is we went there, and while we were there, the alarm started, so we could not go back across the Danube. So we were stuck. We cannot go back, there's no telephones. So we decided to stay for the day, but we were so hungry, you know? And so didn't know what to do, and thirsty and hungry. We went around the house, and Aunt and her family at the time, they were in America, so it was an empty house. We just got the keys. And then we kind of organized ourselves to try to find the remaining potatoes, old potatoes in the ground, you know, after harvest was remaining. And so we gathered that, and we tried to find the water. We could not, so we went into a toilet, not taking it from the toilet itself, of course, but from the system. It was like a very dodgy water, but we cooked it well and ate it together. And somehow, in those moments, when bombs are falling, everything stopped. What was important is what was here, what was now among us. It was very warm interaction. We even started to sing together, and we were even laughing in spite of all that, and we had a nice community there. And that glimpse of something else happening among us, some kind of very strong connection, stayed with me the entire life. It kind of shaped my even research interest in theology. I spent 7 years now at Oxford writing about this kind of community, a church. So this was more than just sharing thoughts, more than just sharing emotions. We were sharing our spiritual lives, our entire self. And this strong community afterwards, when I was thinking about it, this is what helped us remain in sanity during the war. It was our oasis of peace. Because you never know when you're going to die, if you're going to die next day or not. So you make sure that you're in good relationship at least. So this was a time when I experienced this, if it could be said, ideal community, at least glimpse of it. We don't have koinonia fully manifested in history. Church did not manage to really live the fullness of this reality, if we are honest to ourselves. That's why people are leaving, technically. But there are people in different parts of the world, and now that I work in different countries and with students, I can see those small koinonias happening locally, and people are really trying to experience something more than just human connection. So this is holistic aspect of koinonia, and then in this community, everybody has their place. It's not a dependent community where there is a leader, and he decides everything for everybody else, and your job is just to trying to fit in the expectations, and you never fully share and develop yourself. The main thing in this dependent model is common good. We just do what's good for community, but you as individual, you're suppressed. No, that's not what koinonia is. It's not also this independent reality where everybody does what they do, and everybody just pursues their own selfish desires and aspirations. This is community which manages to somehow miraculously balance those two realities, that you feel important, you feel that you are growing personally, spiritually, you are growing towards God, and physically, mentally, and emotionally, socially, whatever, spiritually, you are growing, you are progressing, but also somehow you're moving together as community. You have a particular place based on your gift, that how you contribute to this community, and somehow community is growing among you. So this is a very hard thing to achieve. In certain even political systems, we are trying to reach that. This is an attempt of democracy, which often ends up being a form of anarchy, if not well defined. This is some kind of very totalitarian, dependent model of where you have a monarch of just few people governing everybody else. Interdependent model is hard to achieve, and we could say it comes as a miracle of pneuma. Talked about it in the morning. When different members connect with God, somehow they're becoming part of this living organism or body. Experientially, we can taste this, even though we cannot fully explain. There's a whole discipline, scientific discipline, ecclesiology, which deals with trying to explain this mechanism, these dynamics of relationships. And it's a very fruitful discipline, very interesting. So, just one thing here, and there are some people who feel that they cannot contribute anything to society, to small group, to family, and any other form of koinonia, because they don't have any particular gifts. They're not maybe gifted to speak or to sing or something like obvious which is happening in front of all the people, so they feel like, I don't have this gift. I would like to just spend a few moments speaking to those kind of people, because I witnessed the entire life of my grandma, and she was one of those who always says, I don't know, I cannot even do anything publicly. She's always ashamed. Sits in the last row in the church when she comes, and I don't have any gifts, I'm useless around. This was a woman who was homeless after the Second World War. Her family rejected her because her different religious views. She was a Catholic and so on, and she had 6 sisters and a well-standing Italian family. They had a whole chain of bakeries and hotels and so on. So it was like an influential family, but they literally rejected her and her mom and younger sister. And so they were on their own on the street. Her mom found another guy, but he did not treat them very well. And he left her pregnant, and this woman was struggling to give birth, and nuns did not want to help her because, again, she was sectarian in her views and so on. So technically she spent the whole night trying to give birth to a baby, and they put her there where it was raining, so the water falls on her and everything. So it was quite a torturous event, and she died and the baby died. Father did not want even to pay for the proper funeral, but they put them together with partisans, with just in the same grave. And technically, my grandma reports this, that she felt like this is it for her life. She's on the street. Somebody took her younger sister, so they did not see themselves for each other for years. And she was trying to eat the food that she found there outside, and then some members of local churches accepted her to live a certain period of time at their place, and that's how she was surviving technically. And she thought that she will never be happy and fulfilled in life because she did not even dream about being married and having a normal life. From house to house, she was just changing her locations. But local church, even though she was homeless, they accepted her, and they took it together to come with them to some of the youth meetings in Serbia, in Vojvodina. They said, just Angelika, come with us. She could sing very nice. She had this high colored Dalmatian soprano, so they even asked her to sing for weddings and so on. But then what happened is, when they came to Novi Sad, and there was a big room, like maybe 5-6 times bigger than this one, and full of young people, she was asked to sing a song publicly, and she was all embarrassed, but she agreed, and she performed the song. In the last row there was a tallest guy there in the room, more than 2 meters tall, with all the black mustaches and stuff. That was my grandfather. And so he saw her, she saw him, but she did not dare to even pass next to him from distance. She was dreaming about him, later, and she really wanted something to happen, but she said, what, this is not realistic. So she came back to Croatia. A few months later, she receives a letter from him, but she cannot read Cyrillic. So what she does is she goes into a conference room there and asks some pastor, can you read this letter for me? And then pastor is reading her private love letter. And the letter says here, dear Angelika, will you marry me?
Oh my goodness.
Oh goodness, exactly. At that time they were less philosophical and complicated, I guess, about these issues. But like first letter, that's it. Yeah, I don't recommend. And then she decided to be honest with him. He possibly thought, she's well standing, maybe rich and so on, because they gave her something to dress there, which was not her clothes and so on. He should know the truth. She should not just live with this mask. So she decided to tell him, Isa, thank you for your proposal. I would gladly accept, but I have to say no. I'm naked, I'm on the street, I don't have anybody, and you should know this, and sorry. She turned down the proposal. Letter goes back. And then it doesn't return, the new letter. So she thought, okay, this is it. Her chance is lost. But then, after a while, another letter came, and again she had to go to the pastoral office and ask him to translate. And then he read the words, which stuck in her head and her heart so deeply. Each time she actually tells this story, which by the way lasts like a few hours when she tells it, I'll just give you a nutshell. She always cries, and the words were, dear Angelika, I did not ask you whether you are poor, or whether you have somebody, whether you're rich, or whether you're hungry. I asked you, will you marry me? And for the first time in her life, she felt that she is loved and accepted for who she is, without masks, without the need to pretend that she is somebody better than somebody else. And now she reports how it was during the wedding. She said yes to this great guy, and she could not believe this was like a miracle for her. And then she turned around and she saw the entire church and people who were there also, because she did not have family. They came here to stand as her family. So they stood up when it was her turn, and there was no father to take her through, and But then in her heart she says, I promise one thing. I promise God that I will stay with this man and make him happy also. But I will open my house for this family and for everybody who feels the need, who went through the same thing what I went through. I will open my house and show them the acts of kindness. So since that promise, in our house live more than 70 people, not at the same time of course, but over decades. Some of them are professors in famous universities, Andrews University. Some of them have normal families now. People who came from the street, she found them hungry or something, and then she just drags them there. Says, come, I'll give you food. And then she asked Grandpa, you teach them how to be carpenters, and I'll feed them and so on, and somehow they made it work. So sometimes we spend years and years and we cannot remember that we were ever alone in the house, and this is all about her. She was so sensitive to the needs of others that she turned into one of the best hosts that you can imagine, Even my friends who are my age, before they come to visit me, we live on the second floor, they first go to my grandma, because they tell her their problems and she knows exactly the word you need to hear and to feel better. Particular gift, that she had. And it's so funny sometimes to watch her walking. She's like a big grandma, and there are small grandmas in our street. They're walking like in line, and she's telling them things, and she's influencing all those lives. This person who in public sphere like this would never talk, would never agree to a prayer, would never agree, she changed so many lives. This one old grandma. So never think that you don't have what it takes. Sometimes your brokenness can be your greatest gift. Where you hurt the most, that's where the greatest power can be shown, because you understand exactly the group of people that you can help and nobody else. So when you want to find your area of impact in this world, search for your talents, search for your passions, but don't neglect your pain and your brokenness, because this can be actually the place which determines what's your place under the sun. There is a saying that your calling is where your heart's greatest gladness and the world's greatest need meet. There's always need around us, but you are not invited always to respond to every single need, because you're not qualified, you don't have certain solution for that. But often, if God helped you go through a certain problem in your life and you overcame, and you are winner, so to say, you're victorious, then this story somehow has this healing effect on other people. So in this sense, everybody has a role, and whether through gifts or through brokenness, through your experience, you can bring this and make something of it. If God gave you lemon, how does it say? If life gives you lemon, make a lemonade or something like that. So you can choose, or what you can do with that. And just 2 more points and I'm done. Koinonia is normal and good and healthy if it grows in 2 directions, inwardly and outwardly. There are those communities which are only interested in themselves. They just like people who they know, and when somebody outside comes, they feel like, it's a foreign body, we don't want to necessarily interact. Or there are those communities who are so open to people outside that they don't necessarily have good relationship inside. So the healthiest communities, even marriages, are those who maintain a healthy balance between investment in inner love as well as external life towards others. So otherwise, you turn into a self-consuming unit, a selfish unit of 2 or 3. So this is another aspect which I found in the New Testament. They were growing in love and growing in numbers. And finally, there's this cosmic role of koinonia. If you, in case you accept Christian narrative, one of the best texts describing the cosmic role of this community is found in Ephesians. This is a letter written by Apostle Paul to Ephesus, which is current Turkey city. So he says, God's purpose in all this was, so he said there was a mystery hidden from the beginning of creation. And here it is, now mystery is revealed, that it is through the church, purpose in all this was to use the church to display his wisdom in its rich variety to all the unseen rulers and authorities in the heavenly places. So he technically says, this is the center of universe, This is not just peripheral story. This community is important because it says something about the manifold wisdom of God and love of God. When people see this broken community somehow being drawn together and displaying this divine life, when people see that, they start to believe there is something more than just human presence. It is through this group of people, if they live the life of koinonia, that the fullness of life can be expressed, and other people can intuitively sense it. And they would not like to leave. This will be a magnet for everybody here, I believe. We all long for this kind of relationships. How to get there? You want to go back? It's, yes. How to achieve this koinonia? First point, and something bringing together for this morning, we need to maintain the dynamic of openness towards pneuma, towards the Spirit, to allow God to work in our life. And the more we allow Him, the more He will bring us together. And now towards the community that you're part of, this community of spiritual companions, we can call that, the more you stick together, even though you're very different, the more you start to experience the love, the part of divine love. And the more love feeds itself. When you trust somebody, their natural response is to start to trust you after a while. When you love somebody, natural response is love awakens love. We are love machines, so to say. We are created to love. The greatest thing that we can do as human beings is learn how to love and be loved in return, the way we are, without masks. So I wish that we can experience the glimpse of this love. Something that my grandma experienced. Divine love, which accepts no matter whether we are rich or poor, no matter the gender, no matter the race, love which is unconditionally present, that we want to really overflow towards other people and press together, and then towards the world around. This is going to be embodied message. Not only just empty talk. You know, people saying there are different political parties around, everybody promises something. You know, there is no more space. People don't buy those cheap stories anymore. Whether you are koinonia or not, people will know. So my challenge to you is actually be the change, be that church. Like Martin Luther, what he says, the power of the gospel is like a caged lion. You don't need to defend lion, just release it. You know, so the same thing. We don't need to defend church, we don't need to defend community, just be in a community, and this will provide an idea for people, aha, this is what it means to be human. This is what it means to live the life of fullness, not alone in separation, but in loving relationship with others. We're coming to our text. The point of everything what apostles are preaching from the beginning, what they have heard, seen, and touched, they proclaim why that we can have koinonia with us and with God. You see those two directions of koinonia. In this koinonia, they can find the fullness or joy. So appeal for everybody, get connected. And we have a great opportunity this weekend. Now, as we are eating, as we are playing games, and we are, to get to know other people and make an intentional effort to get to know somebody you never met before. Establish new friendship, maybe perhaps on a new basis, and let God help us all experience the glimpse of His love in this mortal, broken human environment. I think that's the best we can hope in this world, and it can be the source and context for our happiness. Thank you very much.
So I would really like to thank the speaker for this inspiring message. Now we'll have instrument playing piano, right, by Marlies. So in the morning we had some service by children. We left something for the evening as well, so Marlies, please come.
And just to tell you, part 3 tomorrow morning, it's going to be a short one, but we deal with more messy questions. This is ideal vision. Now, what happens when the storm comes? What happens when things are not ideal? How do we then survive in our faith? So, come tomorrow for the test. Yeah, let's just pray and then we can go and eat, yeah? You can sit or stand or whatever you feel comfortable. Dear God, we want to have this interlocked system of roots with other people. This connection that will help us stand even though we go through crisis in our life. People that we can count on. People that we can be fully open to and authentic. People that we can experience this glimpse of divine love with. Please teach us how to love fully and how to be loved. To be human beings which are extraordinary in this particular regard. They live the life of fullness and they live with this fullness of joy and peace and love. Let other people looking at us see the glimpse of something better, of the better humanity that we want to achieve. In Jesus' name we pray this. Amen. Amen.